Hello and a big warm welcome to you and welcome to the Marion Rose podcast. I am starting a whole new series which is all about the Marion Method, which is a set of maps and models and practices and processes that support people, including myself, to get free from what I call disconnected domination culture conditioning. So I call it a way of reparenting and reculturing. And what does that mean? Well, in essence, it means it's not just about looking at our childhood. It's actually looking at a much wider context than that. It includes our childhood, but it also includes the bigger, wider cultural aspect, historical aspects, conditioning, and the oftentimes contrast between our true soul nature and the conditioning that we often need to internalize growing up in and living in what I call the DDC, disconnected domination culture. So I'm going to do a whole series of these, and probably about 4. This is the first, and probably maybe over time do them again. And I love the timing of this. So I do also want to say, if you're new to my work, I have had various podcasts over the years, and I've gone really high tech. I've bought many microphones over the years. I've done lots of things in terms of backgrounds, and what I've come to and where I'm at the moment is really, this is me in my home. It's actually in my bedroom. My mum, who is 94, lives with me. My daughter lives with me. We have dogs, wild birds, all kinds of beings living here. And what I've come to is, in terms of getting free from the DDC, is to include my environment, because so much of the essence of this work is about being embedded in and understanding the effects of our wider environment, including one of the things that I call messages from life, which is the way that everything that happens, everything that we experience, can be a communication from life with a capital L. So if you suddenly hear dog snoring, there's a one of the Frenchies right here snoring with me. There's another one snoring over there. There'll be birds, I'm sure, at certain times that, to me, I used to try and keep those out and keep everything quiet and like a studio. I would probably edit out the sniffings and the ums. And for me now, what I'm much more interested in is being me in my environment. And so I'm sending love to you if you do not enjoy the background noise or the quality of the recording, any of those things. And one of the core elements of the Marion Method is listening to our yeses and nos. So I'm sending love to you if you do not enjoy any of the quality of the noise or any of the things, and I so support your no's as well as your yeses. So given that as a background for today, I am just checking on my little thing here. What's it saying? Yes, okie dokie. So I have some little prompts for myself here, questions. And this episode, I haven't quite got the title yet, but I think it's going to be really about the questions that, and the callings and the invitations and the pieces that all came together in order for the Marion Method to come into the world. And by the way, sometimes I still think, oh, why is it called the Marion Method? I have searched long and hard to find other titles that would do it justice, and nothing ever really nothing quite ever really articulates clearly what I would like to articulate without it being 20 words. So for the moment still, the Marion Method is kind of like a bookmark. It's kind of like a, here. Doesn't really say anything apart from it came through me. So if you're interested, I mean, I called it psychospiritual reparenting and reculturing. That's one of the shorthand versions, but even that really doesn't really articulate what this includes. So here's one of the welcome swallows. Welcome, welcome. So I'm going to answer these questions that I have here, and the birds will be coming to help me do that. And thank you, birds, because the way I see the map, which I'm going to be talking about in a future episode about the maps of the Marion Method, is that we are each unique souls, and that we have a soul's journey, and that everything that's happened on our journey is meaningful and significant. Sometimes some of the most painful points are the portals to our soul's callings, and actually in the map, or in one of the maps I see, they're actually essentially part of the same thing. So in terms of my soul's callings, the questions that have followed me throughout my life, one of the core ones I really noticed as a teenager was, why am I the way that I am? Why am I the way that I am? And why are others the way they are? So I really basically had this calling to understand human beings. And it really came out of my own experience as a teenager of, there's going to be background noises. Okay, so again, rather than trying to keep that away, there was a door opening. Squeaky door closing. Opening and closing doors. There's a lot of opening and closing doors. Endings and beginnings. I experienced a lot of endings, a lot of separation as a baby, as a child, as a teen. And by the time I was a teenager, I was filled with a lot of very big feelings. I felt a lot of terror a lot of the time. I felt so scared most of the time that I didn't really say very much, and particularly in any kind of group scenario, I didn't speak. And in those days it was called shy. Nowadays it might be called more highly sensitive. I probably would have had all kinds of diagnostic labels put on me nowadays if I was a teenager now from then, if that makes sense. But really the calling was for me to understand what is going on? Why do I feel scared? Why am I full of guilt and shame? Why do I seem to be so different from many of my school friends who really seem to be very confident and very, again, these words that were called confident and outgoing and all the things. And I also feel called to share another really significant experience I had, which was, I remember being 9 years old, and I remember the exact moment looking in the kitchen cupboard of my family home, my childhood home, and having my first experience of I'm actually not going to put a label on it, a sense that I exist, I'm here, and me as myself, looking back at myself and having the sense of I am here, I exist. And at that same time, when I was 9, I also read a book called Jonathan Livingston, Seagull. In fact, I've still got that exact copy here, which I wish I'd brought to show you, by, what was his name? Richard Bach, I think. And it was all about a seagull, and all the other seagulls were just happy with eating and eating and eating. And Jonathan was not satisfied with that. Jonathan wanted to fly. Jonathan wanted to understand the heights of being a seagull. Jonathan wanted to understand what it meant to be a seagull. Jonathan wanted to understand what seagulls are capable of. And I remember also reading that at 9 years old and having, again, one of these first senses of deep resonance of, I would say, is like a soul reminder of there is more to life than the eating and the everyday things. And now I would say these are all imbued with deep meaning and purpose and beauty and wonder. It's possible for those that, to me, sacred is in the everyday. and that was such a significant moment for me to see, there, I recognise that in myself. I recognise the call for more. I recognise the call for meaning. I recognise the call for purpose, for understanding more about human beings, who we really are, what we're really capable of, what we're here to do, what we're called to do, all of those kinds of things. So that was a really significant time too. And so those were the kind of the seed planting moments of, or more like the recognition moments, I would say, rather than the seed planting of my soul feeling the call. And I would say in terms of the maps and the models, if you're already familiar with them, it's like my personality and my culture had already wrapped itself around me, and I had adapted to that. And there were these points of recognition, remembering, so understanding again, connecting again with something that really deeply resonated with my soul. There is more here. There is more to being human than what I'm being sold in the DVC in, at that time, the 70s and then the 80s. Koyo, the other French bulldog, is on the rug doing this kind of little joyful scratching. There is more, exactly. Yes, Koyo, there's joy and enjoyment and pleasure and being in the sunshine. Yes, she's just looked back at me, yes. So those are these pivotal moments. And then I'm going to have a sip of my hot chocolate with my mug that I've already had about 4 cups today. It's got chocolate all over it. Then I really had no idea though. I wanted to be a fashion designer. I love clothes. I'm fascinated by the history of clothing, again, by cultural constructs, how that relates to perceptions of, and cultural perceptions and perceptions of what it is to be a woman, for example, and of having a sense of actually how that, my passion for clothing and history and culture and the Marion Method is all coming together. So there's an offer coming, I think, next year. But anyway, I didn't get the marks that I needed in my art to continue that. So I just, from that point, I just didn't really know. I loved art. I loved art, ice skating, reading, and animals as a child. And none of those seemed to be my direction for what I was here to do. So I just did what my friends were doing, and I went for I didn't even get in for a degree, or I didn't even. Back in the day, it was called an HND in business studies. So I grew up in England. I got. I thought I would only have the marks to do this business studies HND. I don't know what I was thinking, because I clearly wasn't thinking. I clearly was very disconnected from myself at this point, because I had no interest in business or business studies, and particularly in what business meant at that time, in the late 80s. But when I got my A-level results, they were much higher than I'd realised. I was so filled with self-judgment. I didn't realise that I could think as clearly as I could. And so I had a year off, and I came here to Australia. I did lots of ice skating and lots of working in cafes. And it was at that point that I found out there was this thing called psychology. I did not even know there was this thing called psychology. And when I learnt that it was all about understanding human beings, I had a big yes. So that was part of this beautiful, ever present thread for me that I've experienced ever since then, of this, these clear calling points of, this is what I want to do, this is what I'm interested in, this is what I'm here to do. So I went to university, I did a degree in psychology, and the university I chose was this beautiful, it's called Royal Holloway, and it was a Victorian building, so it comes back to my passion for the past and history and clothing again. Amazing, like a palace basically, with turrets and wings and all these things. And in my final year I actually lived in one of the turret rooms. So turret, one of those, like a princess. It's been one of my themes also throughout my life. Had a relationship with the poem The Lady of Shalott, which I think I will also do an episode on, the psychospiritual context of that. And two of the main things I really loved in my psychology degree was three: developmental psychology, no surprise there. One of the topics that we specifically did was called the intergenerational transmission of parenting. Yes, I was very interested in that. And the other thing that I was really into, which kind of interests me because it's not generally my forte, which was, what was it called back in the day? Cognitive neuropsychology. So really understanding what a lot of that was understanding with people who had maybe like brain damage, or they'd had an accident and a particular part of the brain had been damaged, and what they could perceive, and then what we might interpret about what that part of the brain did. So like prosopagnosia, I always remember as like not being able to recognise faces. I actually found that really interesting as well, even though I understand like neurophysiology and neurobiology, and it's been very much the all the rage for quite some years. I understand it, but if you were asked to ask me all the words, I never remember all the words, so it kind of comes in one ear and out the other. It's not been my calling to really focus on that. Yes, Koyo, exactly. Hasn't been my calling to focus on the brain. It's been really, my focus has been on feelings, so often on feelings, understanding feelings. Another question: when did I first realise I saw people differently from many others? Well, it was definitely clear. Well, even as a child, I mean, I always had the sense of being different, and I think partly that was from what's often called highly sensitive by Elaine Aron. I now see that more as a spectrum sensitivity, and so many different types of sensitivity, and also because of the extent of the trauma I'd experienced, very significant early separation trauma, and which was part of my calling, I believe, and I grew up with parents who are much older than most of my friends, and also my dad had very different perceptions of reality. So I also grew up very much influenced by that. And my mum was from Australia, so I had a dad who was English. I lived in England. So I think all of these different things just went together for me to always have the sense of being a bit different, seeing things differently, understanding things differently. My dad very much had a very different way of understanding reality to everyone around him. So that was really what I grew up with, and I'm so grateful to him. He's not here in his body anymore, but I really learned from him about thinking outside the box and just being willing to question cultural norms and doing things the way everyone else did them. And interestingly enough, many of the things that he did that back in those times were seen through the eyes of a lot of judgment, DDC, judgment being a big thing from the DDC, later became things that became very culturally actually fashionable. So for example, he would always, in the 70s and 80s as well, when we would go on rambles, he would carry his drinks in a jam jar. And back in the day, that was there's so much judgment about things like that. Because everyone, plastic was the thing back then, Tupperware, and everyone knows that you need to have the latest Tupperware to be in fashion. And so I remember when jam jars really became the fashion, and anywhere you go to get a smoothie, when would that have been? Like in the 2000s. it was all about jam jars, and I thought, yes, Dad, you would have loved it. You would have said yes. So I was doing that 20, 30 years ago. Many things like that he was, way before his time in terms of like just questioning things. So thanks, Dad. I'm very grateful to you. Was there a moment when I knew my life was going to be about understanding human beings? No, not really, but it just kept on being a calling, and another calling, another calling, another. Oh, just I just have this constant, not constant, frequent desire to understand more about reality, about human beings, about what is this, what are we here for, what's really going on, how has this culture come about, who are we really, and every time I learn more and understand more, I want to understand more. If someone had met me at 20, what hints would they have seen of the work I do now? Well, what was I at 20? I was just in my second year at university. Yeah, the hints would have been probably just, well, I love that 20-year-old me. I'd really decided that I was going to dedicate myself to studying really, really, really a lot, and also having a massive amount of fun. And I'm so impressed with how I really found a way to do that. So I'd come really from this teenager full of pain and self-judgment and all of those things, to really this experience of at university of being so devoted to learning about psychology and studying it. I'd be at the library, I'd read, I'd put a lot of care and thought into all my essays. I got firsts each year. I was like one of the, the top marks after the mature student who was there, which was like never my thing at school. I had a lot of self-judgment about my ability to think clearly or remember things. So it really was a whole new shift for me, and I think just there's something already about that sense of power to change and power and willingness to create transformation that was already kind of showing itself there in me. And so I'm just so celebrating that 20-year-old me, and just really immersing myself both in really studying, learning, understanding, really on the deepest level that I could at the time, given there was, it wasn't really the internet even, just library books and lectures and conversations, and having lots and lots of fun and dancing and having a lovely boyfriend and just this beautiful combination, which really is kind of a hint to what I'm passionate about now, which is really these two elements of joy and fun and fulfillment and satisfaction and meaning, but also like this diligent dedication to learning and clarity and meaning and actually intellectual rigor, I would even say. Is like, I love both of those. So being a detective of consciousness, it's been my thing of like, well, I want to understand more, and what about this, and what about this, and what about this, and whatever I'm learning about. So I'm actually having a return to a love of clothes at the moment in a whole new way. So as I said, I'm really looking at history and consciousness and how clothing really reflected the consciousness of each era and what it meant. And I've always been interested in that, but that's coming out again now. So anytime I look at something, I always want to understand what's underneath it, what's behind it. So all the things that I've resonated with over my life so far, the paradigms that really resonate with me are the ones that really aim to go as far back to the source as I possibly can, really, so they're really maps. And so I'll include some of the maps that are my main maps that are my learning lineage, because I'm passionate about that. I'll do that in a future episode. But any of the other maps I've also really been into are similar. They have that similar sense of like really understanding things at the deepest level that seems to be possible. So, for example, I'm also passionate about Buteyko breathing, and again, it's very different from most other perceptions of breathing, although it's becoming again more common now. Like I've been wearing mouth tape. I have my mouth tape right here. I studied that when I was pregnant with my son, who's now 20, so 21 years ago. Been wearing mouth tape at night ever since. Back in the day, it was almost impossible. There was no such thing as mouth tape, and now it's all the thing, isn't it? So I just love. I think part of my thing as well is I love to discover things that are not yet very well known, or to invent things that don't yet exist. That's part of my passion. And so I hadn't shared, but I was premature, so I was born prematurely. And again, I think that's part of my patterning, is to be eager to come, to be early at things, to learn things early, to be amongst either someone who's learning something as it's just new to a culture or being remembered by a culture, or to develop something new, completely new myself. So I love those things. So I'm reading some more of these questions. What mysteries help me be unable to stop thinking? This language isn't necessarily my language. Well, it isn't my language. Make me, I wouldn't say make me. You'll learn, if you don't already know, that the Marion Method is one of the essential pieces about language. Mysteries of which I think so many of us have, of why are we here, what are we here for, what are humans here for, what is the true nature of reality. Those are the kind of deepest questions that I sit with, and these other maps are ways to kind of move some way partly towards those questions. And so one of the questions here is what explanations were never complete for me. Well, here we go. I did my psychology degree, and whilst I'm very grateful that I did it, particularly back in those days, and I think probably still in many university settings, it was a lot of experimental psychology and theories of personality and all these things, but actually in terms of it really hadn't answered the questions that I'd really wanted answering. So I still had this calling. Could say it was a drive, but for really it was like, I want to understand more. That's not, I do not feel fulfilled and satisfied. I do in many ways, but also more. I want to learn more. I'm willing to learn more. And there we go. So one of the questions here is what experiences showed me something existing models couldn't fully explain. So I went to do a PhD at Cambridge University on the mother-infant relationship in the context of postnatal depression, and particularly in the feeding relationship. And I didn't really understand how that really related to my own soul's callings at the time. It was the exact thing. My soul is so wise, life is so wise. I, of course, didn't know that one of my core contributions would be about mothers and babies, understanding the mother-baby relationship, my own experience with my own mum, my own experience as a baby with my mum. So I was doing that, and I was learning, and I'm so grateful. I learned so much about birth before giving birth. I talked to many women who'd just given birth, so I learned about the what was it called back in the day? I cannot remember, but like the chain of what's it called? the chain of, that's not the word, the things that often happen once there's one intervention, the spiral of interventions or whatever it is. I learned so much that really affected my own choices giving birth. I did so much learning. I found the Continuum Concept in a little old dusty bookshop in Mill Lane in Cambridge in 1992, which again, that would be another one of those pivotal moments in my life, which I know I've shared quite a lot of these things elsewhere. I remember finding it in the bookshop and just knowing this was an essential book for me. And really, again, to me, this speaks to this soul's calling, because the Continuum Concept, of course, being so much about really shining a light upon cultural practices in relation to babies and children in particular, in a way that I had not known before. I was still immersed in developmental psychology. I was still immersed in learning about, I did my PhD at the Winnicott Research Unit at Cambridge University, so I was studying Winnicott and the object relations theorists, and so much about mothers and babies and all the different theories and all the different research and la 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 la. So at the same time, and I think this has often been part of my journey, to be at some ways the bastion of again, the DDC, and also learning about other cultures and their completely and utterly different way of being with babies, which became part of my understanding, and why I call it the disconnected domination culture, because it starts with disconnection. One of the first places it starts with is mothers and babies, and in order to do that, it needs to, and it does very successfully often, disconnect women from themselves, from their bodies, from their innate wisdom, from their power, particularly during birth. And so this again was like, I almost have a sense from the psychospiritual context I hold that life with a capital L was going, okay, a little bit like the Truman Show in some way, of life going, okay, we're going to, right, she's going to the bookshop, let's place the book on the shelf, there we go, over here. And I don't exactly know how it works in terms of my soul's callings and life and the interrelationship with all of that, but I know and I feel a sense of deep meaning in all of these things that really jumped out at me. The 9-year-old me looking in the cupboard, the fact that my dad had Jonathan Livingston Seagull, all of his, so this was what I was leading to in terms of, isn't it? Thank you. See life going, remember actually you're answering the question about what experiences kept showing up that didn't fit into these maps. So here was this cultural concept, this cultural perspective that kept on knocking loudly. Look here. This way that you've perceived to be, and even in all your studies, Mazzy back at the time was called, that I was studying about developmental psychology, these are still within this cultural set of belief systems. Over here is a completely different culture, an indigenous culture that has a completely different perception and understanding of babies and children and human beings. And really that was, I would say, is like such a pivotal moment in terms of this background passion for understanding culture. And actually, again, I would see another little thread, which is back in the 70s, and it was like 78 or something, and I actually found some of the videos last year. There was a series where a group of people went to live, and what era was it? Like pre-medieval. So a group of people in England in the 70s went to live as they would have lived a very long time ago. I cannot remember the exact era, but pre all the things that we take for granted, pre-medieval. What's the era called? I cannot think of the name. And I remember again, that having a really big influence on me. And I remember they talked about not washing their hair and how after time their hair just, the natural oils in the hair, making their own clothes, the experiences they had there. Again, that really stayed with me. So again, culture, history, human beings, what it is to be human, the kinds of everyday experiences in terms of how do we live and how do we care for children, how do we care for ourselves, as part of the same thing. But again, the psychology degree, the PhD were not also making sense for me in terms of these other experiences I was having. So number one was with my dad. So he had loads of deja vu experiences. He'd had them right since the end of the war. He was in the Navy when he saw a cloud that looked like Great Britain, and he knew that the war was going to end and that he would be going home. And later that day that was announced. Very frequently he'd have these experiences, and it was very challenging for him because he was very into the scientific paradigm, although he was also really into quantum physics. Even back in the like 70s and 80s, had tens and tens of books, which I also read. So he would say, I don't understand, I've just had this another deja vu, and how does that make sense? And I would say, well, I hear you, and I aim to be listened to him, but also it makes complete sense in terms of things like many of the quantum physics principles. But for him, it was very painful for him. It was something I'm going to say, would grapple with. And the other thing was, when I was in Cambridge, I got into what was then called the New Age. So there was a place called the Cambridge Centre. I met all kinds of people who were studying different spiritual traditions, different ways of understanding reality. Just going to invite Buddha to stop scratching himself. Hang on a minute, Buddha's the name of the dog. Interesting. Buddha. Hey, Buddha. 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 Come on. Thank you. He scratches himself on the wood and hurts himself. I am not willing for him to do that. Well, there you go. So that's kind of a bit of a message, isn't it, about my dad. I wanted to help him. I wanted to understand him. I wanted to understand more reality. And also I wanted to make sense of how did psychology fit with all of these things that I was learning about spiritual traditions and meditation and yoga and all the things. Probably all the snorting now. That's the Buddha. The Buddha is in the room. And I decided that alongside my my PhD, I wanted to also train as a psychotherapist. And there were two kind of modalities I was interested in. One was in family therapy, which is always again now in terms of my interest in systems and understanding contexts and ecologies and all of the things. And the other thing was psychosynthesis. And psychosynthesis had first come to me again. Apparently randomly, but it's not randomly. His life going in, exit stage left or enter stage left. She's going da-da-da-da. I went to Canada one summer in 1988 and to Vancouver, and one day I went to the University of British Columbia, UBC, and I had a look and wandered around. It was very beautiful. They had like 4 ice rinks or something. So I was very jealous. And in the university bookshop, I found this book, What We May Be, Techniques for Psychological and Spiritual Growth Through Psychosynthesis by Piero Ferrucci, forward by Laura Huxley. And I've got the little writing in there, Vancouver, 1988. Look how old that is. And this was a book of, there's an old letter from Cambridge University, all about practices. Look at that. The will. Couldn't make it up, could you? And look, a ticket. I wonder what the ticket is. Marion Rose. Well, this is a Mullumbimby, so this is more recent. The Byron Ballet Gala, Coppelia. My daughter's ballet performance years ago. Trust that that's also going to be relevant. What year was that? It doesn't say. Interestingly, some years ago now. The Will. There's a story here. I haven't read this book for quite some years. I've had a look at it more recently, but I haven't read it all. Interesting about Will, but it starts off, even this, look. The Italian opera composer Rossini, we are told, was as lazy as he was brilliant. Talk about DDC, conditioning, judgment there. You see, I would speak differently. I mean, Piero Ferrucci may well speak differently now. This book was written in 1982. But there is a whole chapter on the will. And yeah, there were lots of things, lots of different practices and so on, as well as understandings, but also one saying start today, a bit of paper, but also the pathology of the sublime. And then different visualizations, the sun, the flame, the butterfly. So I hadn't realised this was in the back of my consciousness, but clearly it was. And in 1992, I sent off for a prospectus from the Institute of Psychosynthesis, and I remember this was one of those and other moments. I'm sure I've done a podcast with some of these elements in elsewhere, so my apologies if you've heard all these elements before, but I'm trusting I'm called to share them again. So this beautiful prospectus, if you're watching the video, I loved already. That was this beautiful, not so common in those days, in the early 90s, beautiful thick cartridge paper, calligraphy, and then in these beautiful quotes throughout. In every human being there is a special heaven, whole and unbroken. So I'd had all these callings, I'd had all this sense of these things I was learning about from the New Age, my dad's experience, and here there was a psycho-spiritual psychotherapy that held, not like many of the maps that I'd learnt, that there's something innately wrong with or awry with human beings. No, that in every human being there is a special heaven, whole and unbroken, which is a quote from, it says it somewhere here, my apologies, I cannot see who the quote is from, but anyway, I looked at this. I had the family therapy prospectus, and I had this one, and I remember sitting on my bed. It was a futon, it was the early 90s, my futon on the floor, and reading through this in the dappled sunlight of Tennyson Avenue, Cambridge, and looking through this prospectus and seeing these things like the higher mind and the creative process, the chakras alongside object relations, the triphasic model, the history and evolution of psychotherapy, the search for self, that had such an effect on me, the evolving self and the craft of therapy, will and the act of will, subpersonalities and disidentification. So long before parts work was known, subpersonalities was one of the core parts, the imagination and dream work, Gestalt skills and sensory awareness, context and the guiding relationship, crisis of meaning, will and psychological laws, ego development, evolution of consciousness and the emergence of individuality, self-formation, individuation and the will. And then interspersed with these beautiful calligraphic sayings like Khalil Gibran's, "No man can reveal to you aught but that which already lies half asleep in the dawning of your knowledge." In other words, all these experiences I'd had of recognizing, remembering, resonating. Resonating, to do with sound, I imagine. So, and sonar, perhaps. That had been my experience. And I just knew, even before I had the language of yeses and nos, we do not see things as they are. We see them as we are. The Talmud. St. Augustine, "Insomuch as love grows in you, so in you beauty grows, for love is the beauty of the soul." So again, I'm going to be talking a lot about psychosynthesis when I talk about my learning lineage. This was just a yes. It was just a yes. So here's Roberto Saggioli, who created psychosynthesis. "Man's spiritual development is a long and arduous journey, an adventure through strange lands full of surprises, difficulties, and even dangers. It involves a drastic transmutation of the normal elements of the personality, an awakening of potentialities hitherto dormant, a raising of consciousness to new realms, and a functioning along a new inner dimension." And the other thing about Saggioli was that he really advocated for psychosynthesis continuing to develop. He really saw it about learning from other modalities. You would have heard there, object relations and Gestalt and all kinds of other practices and maps that he deeply acknowledged, but also that were combined. And Joan and Roger, who created the Institute of Psychosynthesis in London, where I trained. And for me, it's like all of these, I mean, I'm reading them now. Even if I read them now, I'd be like, oh yes, psychospiritual pathology, self-realization and psychological disturbances. That sounds really interesting. The art of therapy, the moral imperative, psychospiritual pathology, psychiatry and psychotherapy, the nature of suffering, narcissism, the alienation of the self, psychospiritual psychotherapy and spiritual practice, sexuality and spirituality, psychology of groups, group analysis, soul trauma, addictions and eating disorders, Gestalt and sensory awareness, psychology of groups, group dynamics. I mean, history and evolution of consciousness. Can you imagine me at 24 reading History and Evolution of Consciousness in year 4. Oh my gosh, yes. This is synthetic thinking and model building. Oh my gosh, I mean, still, I'm just as fascinated. The History and Evolution of Consciousness, still one of my passions. The course explores the patterns that connect all things and how we understand and intuit both the phenomenal world and the world that is unknown and emergent. So to do so adequately, we will seek the help of some of the great thinkers throughout the ages and explore how their different ways of understanding reality can be related to the different dimensions of the triphasic model that underpins the psychosynthesis training. Well, I had a massive yes for this, so much so, and then postgraduate training, so much so that I did go on to start all the prospectus information. I started the training in October 1992. The first year was just all our own personal psychosynthesis. I started the next year, 1993, started taking on clients, it was called back in the day, which means that it is 33 years this year that I've been working one-on-one with people. And so I trained there for 4 years and then did another 2 years of postgraduate training. So that was pretty much most once a month, travelling up to London. Then we had summer schools every summer as well. This had such a huge influence on me, psychosynthesis, and as I say, I think it's probably the next episode, I will talk more about how it influenced me. This is more like my lived experience of it. Yeah, thanks Joan and Roger. Thanks Roberto Saggioli. I mean, just really, I don't even want to think. I would cry to even think about not having that. And what I would love to say is, and I will say this more when I do talk about the influence, is every time I'm passionate about something, I love to tell everyone about it. So quite a lot of people I know trained in psychosynthesis because I told everyone I knew. I mean, this was before the days of social media. Quite a lot of people I know did Buteyko. Quite a lot of people I know did many of the other things that I got into, because when I get into something I love it, I want to share it with people. So that was 1992 to 1998. So really, then I was weaving together. So I was doing my PhD at the same time. So I was doing a PhD and doing a psychosynthesis training. And then I started working as a psychotherapist. I also did various other things. I was a postdoctoral research fellow in infant development. Then after that, I was a university lecturer on the therapeutic relationship in the first university department of the complementary health studies at Exeter University. That was so interesting. So again, that was clearly life saying, you're very interested in health and the body and how that relates to consciousness and psychology, and the therapeutic relationship is so vital here. So here we go. Come and do this. Babies, I was still immersed in understanding babies. So not only with my PhD, but then the postdoctoral fellowship was all about babies. So I'm so grateful that I listened to myself and the callings, and that life just kept sending me these opportunities for learning, and that I had all of these things before becoming a mother as well. I also started weekly psychotherapy in 1991, I think, something like that. Something like that. Anyway, I had 10 years of psychotherapy before becoming a mother, which I'm so grateful for. So I'm playing with my plats right now. I'm going to have a little pause. And that is indeed an apt place to pause, because then I left everything I knew, or so much of what I knew, and I moved to Australia to be with the father of my children, Michael, and that was a whole different era. So that was at 30, when I was 30 years old. Again, I followed the callings. I kept following the callings. I kept doing things where I would do things, and again, I'm very celebrating those younger parts of me, because still at this point, still had a lot of self-judgment. But yeah, I clearly did listen to myself a lot, because many people, when I left academia, many people said, well, no, don't leave academia. And I said, well, I am going to. And then when I decided to stop being a psychotherapist, many people said, but you've done all this thing. No, why are you stopping? I just kept following the calling. So I'm just so grateful that there was all the way through this sense of, maybe I missed avenues and messages and opportunities, but I clearly listened to a lot and made a lot of really big changes in my life, including moving a very long way away and starting my life in some ways all over again, which was also really helpful in terms of getting free from cultural conditioning, because, and particularly with parenting, because I went on to feel really comfortable to do things completely differently from how I'd been brought up with, and how many of my peers who stayed, who were still in England, were doing things. So there was this freedom to really listen to myself and be so much less affected by the culture that I'd grown up in and that I'd lived in. Which again, I'm so grateful for. It made things so much easier, because I did do a lot of things which I would say again are, in terms of freeing myself from DDC conditioning. And so this was really the next era. And you might be saying, well, why is this relevant? This is all relevant to the Marion Method, because these are all the callings that led to me understanding what I understand now. That's become a little bit of a life story, hasn't it? But anyway, each is so pivotal, because my calling and what I contribute in the world, and my own life and my own life experience, and what's been meaningful and important to me, they're one and the same. They're not disconnected. And I do think that is one of the things that the DDC tries to get people to trick us into believing, that what we might call our work life is different from what's often called personal life. It's often called, personal and professional. Whereas what I'm passionate about is everything having meaning, and that what we do is a reflection of our soul. It brings us meaning and purpose, and that we are supported to follow our callings. And so that's why I'm sharing all of this, because my own life journey and following my callings and developing the Marion Method are all relevant. They're all interconnected. So again, I'm going to share lots more about aware parenting in the threads and learning lineage episode. But in short, when I was pregnant, I wanted to find a way of understanding, responding to babies that would fit with all these maps that I then had by now. I had the developmental psychology, attachment theory, I had the Continuum Concept, I had that understanding of babies' needs for closeness, and all of these things that I'd trained in. I'd also done all kinds of things like rebirthing and holotropic breath work and all these things. So I was looking for something that would have this understanding of attachment theory and the effects. So I was really into pre and perinatal psychology, so that would understand the effects of our birth and time in utero and all of these things. And I came across Aware Parenting by Letha Salter. And again, it was another one of those moments of, yes, this is it. This is what I've been looking for. And it brought in this whole new understanding. I'm so grateful to Letha. Aware parenting helped me understand feelings in a way that was like just a deep understanding of feelings and the healing power of feelings and the information that feelings give us. And so I just immersed myself in it. You would probably know I've got other podcasts. I've got a present podcast on that, and a past one. And again, this became like my devotion to really understanding it, to buy the books that were there, to talk to Letha, to practice it, to experiment. And because I had this background now in developmental psychology and actually observational practice of babies, that's what I did with my own, first my daughter, who's now 24, and then my son, who's 20, observing, practicing, experimenting, learning through experience. And so much of the Marion Method map has been influenced by aware parenting, and I'm also so respectful and willing to always be respectful of Aletha Salter's work to keep them very separate. So I see it as this one directional thing of acknowledging all the ways that aware parenting has influenced the Marion Method, without the Marion Method, with being very clear what is aware parenting, what's the Marion Method, and when I'm offering aware parenting, just offering aware parenting. So to me that's very, very important. But in summary, what aware parenting helped me understand human beings. It really helped me free up from some of the most core essential elements of DDC conditioning, which is basically that there's something innately wrong with us as human beings that came from the kind of moral / religious models that were sinful, and that we need to learn to be good, in inverted commas, and what our true nature, and that children are... There's my alarm for my session. That children are innately just wild and need to learn to be compassionate and connected and cooperative and all of these things. And aware parenting just turned all of that on its head. In fact, to help me make sense of so much, because I saw it with my very own eyes, and I saw what I believe to be the true nature of human beings, and what is the difference between what we come in with and the effects of our experience, and whether our needs are met, and whether the percentage of our feelings are heard. And so the times when Michael and I did meet our children's needs more and listened to a higher percentage of their feelings and gave them information and did attachment play, all the elements of aware parenting, they were deeply present in a way that we had not really seen in human beings before. Deeply present, deeply compassionate, deeply connected, wanting to contribute, clear thinking, creative thinking. And I still see these elements in them now in ways which I'm just in awe by. And this isn't aware parenting, what I'm going to say, but I tend to think of each generation evolving from the next, and I really see the ways in which their consciousness can go to places where mine absolutely cannot. I see this with my mum as well. It's like the consciousness expands. I am just in awe of aware parenting, and still that it's still not really widely understood because of some of these essential elements of which I will go into. And if you know aware parenting, you know what they are. And aware parenting had, which I didn't really realise at the beginning, but as time went on and I started to write my own books, but to understand more that the Marion Method was actually so much about culture. So I actually started to go back and reread Aletha's books, like her first book, The Aware Baby, and see, like, in the very first chapter, it's all about culture. It's all about the effects of culture on parenting practices and beliefs about human beings. And I had thought, how this was here all along. Oh my gosh. I'm in awe of Aletha's understanding of human beings. So the learning through practicing aware parenting and being deeply submerged in it for 24 years has been beyond measurably powerful, and I am transformed as a human being. And that was part of the weaving. I learnt so much from that. And then so I'm going to pause again, because this is longer than I thought it would be. So what discoveries? So the discovery that our innate nature really is presence when enough of our needs are met, where we as parents are supported enough to listen to our children's feelings, our baby's feelings, that they are these beings of presence, deep relaxation, a deep desire to contribute. That, there's nothing that anyone could bring any other theory. And yes, I know I'll update my understanding of reality and human beings, but I've seen that so many thousands and thousands and thousands of times that, the evidence for me was so powerful. So the joy of actually seeing who we most essentially are when the conditions, so again, this is about, the environment, when the conditions are enough for that to shine through. So again, it just became this very palpable thing for me. Anyway, over time, and this is, so here's the core part here, is one of the main impetuses to develop the Marion Method really was because I saw in my own practice and in many of the parents I was working with by then as an aware parenting instructor, that they were doing all of this. They were meeting their baby and child's needs, or doing as much as they could to. They were listening to their feelings. They were wanting to avoid punishments and rewards, and yet they were doing all those things themselves. They were judging themselves if they had big feelings. They were ignoring their own needs. They were punishing themselves with guilt and self-judgment and all of these things. And I saw how much harder the practice of aware parenting became when then all of this, what I now see as cultural conditioning, got piled on the top of the practice of it. So people would judge themselves and their practice and all of the things. And so it really became clear to me that here I was being invited to return to my understanding of adults and the journey of the soul and all of those things, soul not being an aware parenting term, going back to the Marion Method now, that this was essential. Well, not essential. This made the practice of aware parenting so much more enjoyable and easeful, and it became what then I see as this this parallel process that we're invited on. So this is very much the Marion Method, is that when we're parenting, we're not only being invited to help our child stay deeply connected with who they really are within the culture that we're within, but also we're being invited to reconnect with who we really are. And so for me, that became so much of the Marion Method. And then I found all these things that I now really knew through lived experience, way more actually than all the more theoretical learning I'd done, or even learning about adults, was actually that so many of the practices of aware parenting could be also utilized in tending to what I call the younger parts of us, not an aware parenting term. So really, the same practices have the same effects for us in revisiting the past. So revisiting past feelings, revisiting past experiences, that the same things that are helpful for a 3-year-old child can also be helpful for us to go back to when we were 3. So I was finding this so powerful in my own experience. I was finding it so powerful in working with the parents I was working with, that the maps just started to develop in terms of things like I created my first online course in 2014 called Love Being a Mother. And just as I was sharing about it one day, I was thinking, it just came to me, well, you could almost imagine like a divine mother and a divine father, and you can imagine like really hearing the kinds of things that you say to your child and hearing those, and that was really the beginning of starting to create these practices and processes that were the Marion and are the Marion Method, the in loving presences being such a core part of that. So the reparenting element started to really develop more and more. So the reparenting with love, which is really, in the Marion Method, there are three main elements: love, will, and consciousness. And so the love element is so much really about the psychotherapy world, becoming more loving towards ourselves, understanding our love needs. But it's also that bigger picture piece in terms of culturally understanding how much disconnection we experience in the DDC, and on a deep soul level understanding the interconnectedness that is who we really are. So so it really started to really come into fruition then, and every course I created that was not an aware parenting course just brought more and more clarity. I'm like, oh, okay, and and I didn't also share about one of the other modalities that I trained in, but I will share about that. And I haven't included nonviolent communication, which is where really language and my understanding of culture really came into. So actually I will rewind a bit. I didn't talk about the field project. It was also from my dad. My dad was getting older. I saw his pain about the deja vus and how does it make meaning, and I looked in, so it's 2005 I think. I put in the search engine deja vu and something or other, and up came the field project, and I was reading through it, and I had a yes for myself. So my desire to contribute to my dad, I actually had a massive yes for myself. I also, about 4 years, dived in deep, studied, trained, and actually I was going to become a certified trainer, and at that exact point I had a massive falling out with my mentor, and that avenue was stopped. However, that work again deeply influenced mine, and I will share more about that in another episode. But I really learned so much about willingness, yeses and nos. So we had the psychosynthesis already, the will, the field project. So the field project also willingness, and then MVC, even the phrase, would you be willing, so much about willingness. And then aware parenting, understanding about children's needs for choice and autonomy. So what started to happen was I was writing in all these notebooks. So I was offering courses and clarity was coming, but I was also, this was actually before the online courses. I'm sorry, I got so excited. I haven't made a timeline of all these things. Before the online courses, I had these little notebooks. And I'd write. And I remember the map for the 3 types of feelings was already emerging. And I had books and books and books. And I felt this frustration because I was here like, I want to be sharing this. I think it's so helpful. Why doesn't everyone want to know about the 3 types of... Well, I wasn't calling it that then, but because what I was doing was starting to think about socially, psychosynthetically. I was synthesizing these different ways of understanding will and willingness, and these different ways of understanding feelings, and I was bringing them all together and seeing something new, or seeing new things by mapping all of these things and seeing, that fits with that. Willingness, willingness, yes, no, yeses, noes. Oh my gosh, look what happens when we put them all together. Oh! So there's this combination of, he was writing all these notebooks and feeling frustrated, which then led to me starting to create online courses, because I was like, this is part of the calling. I want to contribute. I call this. I love it. I want to share. And also this fear and terror from my past in terms of speaking, which in itself helped me understand the journey of the soul and how those two generally are part of the same process, which I will share about in another episode. So again, my lived experience helped me really understand that, and enough to the point where in fact I was rollerblading well, I won't share the whole story, but I got a very clear message from life that my brakes were too big, and it was that was dangerous. Stopping myself was dangerous on my rollerblades. It wasn't the going fast that was dangerous, it was the too big brakes. So I got a very big kind of splat of okay. And so I did. I went for it, and I went for online courses in the way that I'd gone for my degree. And I found Joanna Kingsford, was introduced to her, and I just thought, I'm going to do what she's doing. Deeply resonate. So I created a course every month for several years, got up to as before my children 362 days a year, created 20 different websites to immerse myself in learning all of this tech stuff so that I could share this information. So the notebooks were finally starting to come out into the world, and I needed to transform myself in order to bring this information through. This is what needed to happen, this as well. And this was part of the psycho-spiritual journey, because I had all this. I had it in the notebooks, but I was terrified to speak. And then for many years, including like even now, like the whole microphone situation, the number of microphones that I bought that are broken. Every phone that I buy, the microphone deteriorates very quickly. That just like, it's been a long journey about being heard, having my voice heard. So I needed to do a lot of inner work, and I was practicing all these practices that I was developing, and they were helping. They were helping. I was sharing more and more, and then I was doing more and more, and then I was changing my beliefs about myself and what I could do and what I could contribute, and I was having these clarities coming every course I created, every time I wrote something, every time I brought things together, I would understand all these things more, and these maps were developing and coming clear. And then the practices were coming, and I was practicing them. I practiced the inner loving presences work, and I connected with my inner loving mother and my inner loving father, my inner best friend and my inner beloved. And I developed the willingness practice based on Philip's The Decisive Question, but I changed a whole lot of it to bring in love as well as will. And then I developed his work as well in terms of the yeses and nos, and then I brought them all together, and then I brought in language, all the things I learnt from Marshall Rosenberg, but I also added in extra parts in terms of how that fits with the soul and love and will. And then the 3 types of feelings map got clearer, and it just kept on getting clearer and clearer and clearer. And it was so clear, the maps and the practices were very clear, but I'd only really practiced them on myself. So I was like, oh yeah, I've got this thing, and I wasn't really valuing it. And that was part of my journey because I needed to do a lot of inner work to come to actually value what's coming through me. So then for quite some years, I was just working with people and sharing these things with them. And then what I kept seeing was, it's not only that I have completely transformed, not in who I really am, I've become more who I really am, I've become more my soul. I've just got free from a whole lot of the conditioning, and I've tended to a lot of the younger parts of me so that I can be doing this here without judging myself and just sitting on my bed. Then the people I was working with, and the people that are coming to courses, and the people who are having mentoring kept on having and telling me similar experiences. Like, so many times they would say, my mother she will never be able to give me empathy, she'll never be able to listen to my feelings. And we did the in loving mother practice, and then over time that also developed to the soul versions practice. And then so many times now they say, you'll never guess what just happened. And I'm delighted every single time they experience, as they change their relationship with their in loving mother or the soul version of their mother, the external relationship also changes. They gradually get free from judging themselves, just as I did. I was more filled with guilt and shame and self-judgment than anyone else I knew apart from my mum. And I got free from that. Got free from guilt. Experienced shame like about once a year. I don't judge myself. I saw this also. People were also experiencing it in their lives. Willingness and will. I used to coerce myself to the point of burnout. I could coerce myself over and over and over and over again. And I did. In my PhD, I did. And I was doing things in willingness. I was experiencing Wu Wei, effortless action, following my callings and being deeply connected with life. The Taoists call Wu Wei, doing, not doing, having a sense of collaborating with life, deeper sense of meaning and purpose. And then my mentees and course participants were also experiencing this. And yeses and nos, that became very clear that this is one of the central things of the Marion Method, listening to our yeses and nos, because that's how we most directly connect with our soul and our callings. And this is a learned experience that we have. Instead of every time we experience something, we are invited to, instead of judge ourselves or coerce ourselves, to learn to experience, so that we more, in the way I say about the Marion Method, that our personality, our relationships and our life become a clearer reflection of our soul. And all these things that I had experienced and was experiencing, it was being replicated. And this is when I really started to value what I was doing, and actually from that, why doesn't anyone want to learn about the 3 types of feelings? In fact, I remember I once made back in the day, before there were reels, but I made a little video when it was new on social media to be able to put little videos on. And I literally, many hours into describing the 3 types of feelings. And I thought, this is going to be it. This is just, everyone's going to resonate. Everyone's going to want to know about it. And of course. And I think I got 1 like or something like that. So why? But again, now over time, I have more and more people. I'm still kind of intrigued. Like, why doesn't everyone? This has changed my life. Understanding what I call the 3 types of feelings, by again bringing together these different maps and models and language and understanding all the things. It's transformed my life from being full of guilt, shame, self-coercion, confusion, overwhelm, being flooded with feelings all the time, to seeing my feelings as beautiful gifts that help me, they give me information about what I'm thinking, what I'm needing, and what I'm remembering from the past. And then I know how to tend to each of those. It just, isn't that the most delicious map? Then it's also completely practical. So that is the other thing that I love about the Marion Method work. I remember back in the 90s when I was with I had a first husband then. We lived in Devon, and we lived in this lovely little house on the top of a hill in a little cottage in a little village. And we had a greenhouse for a kitchen. The kitchen was an extension greenhouse with a vine. And I remember sitting at the kitchen table and reading all these books about consciousness and spirituality and all the different spiritual teachers, and reading, and so many of them would say things like, just love yourself. And I'd be like, but how? Please tell me how to do that practically, specifically, step by step. So what I'm really passionate about, so much of the Marion Method work is about having a big picture map and models and so on, big esoteric concepts, but really practical, tangible, practical things, like exactly what language helps us feel more connected to our true nature's love and will. What exact words? And what exact words help us feel connected to our DDC conditioning? What exact words? What exact practices? What exact words might we hear from our inner loving mother to experience being unconditionally loved? And exactly what might happen if we go, well, I don't believe you. How exactly is it different to affirmations? What exactly is the willingness practice? How do I move from wanting something to be really truly willing for it, not pretending, not acting as if, not an affirmation, truly willing? How do I get more comfortable with saying no when I grew up in the DDC, no meant being very dangerous, in danger, to deeply tangible experience that saying no is what creates safety? How have I gone from my own experience of feeling terrified most of the time, full of guilt and shame, to understanding exactly what creates fear, tending to the 3 types of feelings in relation to fear, in order to completely transform my day-to-day experience? And again, I'm seeing people replicate that in their own lives. So I know it's not just me doing this. These are practices that actually work. These are maps that help people change their whole life experience. I love it. I'm so grateful. I feel so fulfilled. And this year, so for many years, these things were all developing, and then I had the sense of them being put on the back burner for a bit, and life saying, yes, darling, I know you want to talk more about the Marion Method, but what I would like you to do first is to write these books about aware parenting. So these are over here. I kind of put them over that side because, again, I really want to be clear. This is about the Marion Method, deeply influenced by aware parenting, but it's not aware parenting. But anyway, life basically said to me, yes, darling, but we want you to just immerse yourself for a few years in putting into book form all that you've learned over these past, well, now it's 21 years as an instructor, 24 years parenting. When I started writing them, it was less than that. But anyway, so they're done. The kookaburras are laughing. And then at the end of last year, I had the sense of, okay, it's the end of an era. I still love aware parenting. I still offer it. I still teach it. I still help instructors people become instructors. And now here's some more time for the Marion Method to work, to get the books out, there, look at the kookaburras. There we go. The kookaburras are laughing a lot. Now is the time. And at the beginning of this year, like many of us, so the beginning of 2026, all my old ways of doing things no longer worked. I felt completely called to do things in a completely new way, so I offered these immersive experiences, and every experience I got clearer and clearer and clearer. I experimented. I offered things I'd been called to offer for years, the true power course. Well, it wasn't a course in the end, because it became clear to me that this is about lived experience, it's about immersive experience, and that this is the way I'm being invited now to share it. Also going back into in person, from being in my little tower writing books and showing things on the internet, in person, and more connected. If it's online, it's in a Zoom call together, not watching a recorded thing, although I still do have lots of recorded things, and there are books coming. Anyway, I'm also celebrating myself because it was a time of just following the callings. I had no idea what was going to unfold. What's happening next? What am I going to do next? What am I going to create next? What are we co-creating? Became very clear it was a co-creative thing. Mother power together came about. When the washing up came about, the magnetic yeses and repellent noes came about, and I got very clear that the end of June, halfway through the year, would be a completion of a 6-month period of experimenting, and then the second half of the year is like, okay, now you've experimented, okay, now here's the Marion Method Metamind that I've also known has been coming for many years. It's now here. This other offering, the compasses, has come about, which is the practices and processes. Following our callings has come in. because years ago I also was doing things like respond loving to your calling. So this is really going back to, do you remember these Friday mornings at Psychosynthesis Journey of the Soul? Oh look, it's even a 2026 version with ASMR, but I do not have fingernails because I really like not having long fingernails and not having nail varnish, and I'm often scratching my dogs, so they've all often got little dog fur in them. Anyway, Journey of the Soul, it's become all clear. I'm just so grateful to be here because I'm here. I feel this past 6 months even more fulfilled, even more grateful, just like, oh, really? Is this level of fulfillment, of joy in every one of these immersions? I'm in awe. I'm filled with awe. I feel so deeply satisfied, fulfilled. I have such a deep sense of meaning and purpose. I have a sense now of the shape of, like, really this, in a way, in some ways, this kind of gravitas of the Marion Method work, like this fullness of it coming in now. Like, yes, darling, we know you've been keen, but remember, trust the timing. We invite you to trust the timing. And I've really needed to see through all these different ways, like, oh, okay, yes, the things I've experienced, the transformational effects of this work that I have experienced, other people are experiencing them too, which has given me that reassurance and that sense of, this really makes a difference, So I'm going to look at the rest of the questions. Is there anything else? So much. I've learned so much from babies, from my children, from my mentees, from the immersion participants. What else? Why do I think I became the person who developed the Marion Method? Well, I don't know. I'm just grateful that life's given me all this, and I've been drawn to these amazing teachers, and I think there's something about this calling, and this, despite like I've experienced hugely horrific things in my life at various times, there's something about this, and this psycho-spiritual context that holds the complete compassion and presence with the deepest pain, and yet always sees that we are more than the pain, that we are a divine soul, and there is always meaning and purpose, not in a way that spiritually bypasses the pain, but actually which deepens our the boat through which to travel in the pain, to actually really feel it at the deepest level. And this map to me is just so helpful to hold at least these two, if not more, layers of consciousness. So it was also just, and I think the other question would be, is I just keep wanting to understand more and making more connections. And again, I'm really grateful to Roberto Saggioli for that sense of his invitation to keep learning, to keep being open to new ways of seeing the world. So having these maps that deeply resonate, and then immersing myself in them and practicing them and experimenting till I really embody them, and then being open to, okay, what's next? What else am I called to really learn? And this deep embodied learning that I've just been so called to do. So I'm excited because I've already come across another map that I'm diving into over the past 3 years, which I'm absolutely loving, which is also really informing the Marion Method work. So that is it. Thank you for listening. Is there anything else I want to share? Isn't it lovely? Look, I just did a burp then, and because I know that burps are, again, part of our innate body wisdom, whereas my DDC conditioning would say, DDC, shame sticks, self-judgment, and better delete that. No, I'm not going to, because for me, a burping is a beautiful sign. It's a sign that of what's moving, a sign of something being digested, a sign of something being spoken that's meaningful, and many other things. So I'm keeping in the burps and along with the dog snores, because my work is about unconditionally loving all parts of ourselves, the wisdom of our body, the aging process. Again, if you're watching the video, I noticed at the beginning of this video, look, my neck's getting more wrinkly. Like, and to see that without hitting myself with those DDC sticks, which one of the core elements of power is the DDC works hardest at the portals of most power. That's why it works hardest at the mother-baby relationship, birth, menarche, and post-menopause, menopause and post-menopause. It doesn't want women of what used to be of a certain age, used to be called that, didn't it? I mean, I'm 58 now, I believe. Yes, 58. 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 100s, to be developing into their power and their our transmission of power. So what's the most effective way of doing that? A whole load of shame. That's happening even more nowadays. Even more shame about that. I'm here to counteract that. It's a key part of the Marion Method work. I'm going to be offering things in the future about what's called aging and getting free from the DDC. I've got so many things that I want to offer. So this is episode 1. In episode 2, I really want to dive in deeper to really give much fuller credit to Roberto Saggioli and Joan and Roger Evans for their contribution in terms of psychosynthesis. Then Aletha Salter and how much aware parenting has influenced this work. Then Philip Gollerbuck and his field project and how much that influenced this work. And Marshall Rosenberg and Nonviolent Communication and how much that influences work too, particularly in terms of language and culture. So I'm going to be sharing more about those and how I've specifically weaved elements that I saw were like, oh, that's a piece of puzzle. Look, can we put that if you into puzzles? Now when you have like that piece and looking for that piece and suddenly that piece fits with that piece and everything makes sense in a whole new level. That's my experience so often of, oh my gosh, those two pieces fit together. I find that so satisfying. I love pattern making. I love making sense of things. I love seeing where things fit together. And I love creating maps and practices that support that process for us to become who we really are and do what we're here to do and become the fullest potential of who we really are and what we're here to contribute in the world, both individually and collectively. So, thank you for watching or listening and to listening to the snoring and the burping. There was no farting in this episode. And I will see you if you want to come back. I invite you to listen to your yeses and nos. I would love to see you next time. So much love.